One of the things that is important as we prepare for the next little while, no one can predict whether this administration stays 4 years or 8 years. I think it will depend on us. But as I said in the chapter leaders meeting early this morning and in the board meeting I just came from, a lot of it shifts on how we move, not that we move. We have no choice but to move. We're not going to roll over and just succumb. But we can now focus on local and state, not only elections, but governing. One of the very important sessions, if you don't make anything, is tomorrow when we deal with pension funds and money. Why do I say that? I was breaking it down in the board meeting. A lot of us don't understand every week you get your paycheck and they take out your retirement fund or your pension fund. It goes into a pension fund that they hire money managers, and the money managers invest with many of the developers that's gentrifying our communities. Many of us don't even ask who's managing our money. I met with a union leader a couple of weeks ago who's the president of a union that 80 to 85% of the membership is black and Latino, multi-billion-dollar pension fund, and he didn't know who was the one managing the money. So we're going to deal with that tomorrow. We're going to make them shift some of these pension funds. To understand all of that, we can impact municipal governments and how we govern. I was listening to some of the questions at the end of the last panel that Angela Wright did such a great job for us. And that is, a lot of us don't understand there is a difference between running for office and governing. Trump is finding that out. When you're running, you can say anything. And some folk will believe you. But when you govern, you get the reality of what you need to do to make things happen. I remember I was watching a movie on a plane. I only get to watch TV and movies flying. And I was watching a movie on Mandela. And I think it was the one Idris Elba did. And there's a scene where right after the election, I was over there, I was an election observer in '94. And there's a scene, Mandela used to walk early in the morning for his exercise. And as he was walking, the newspaper delivery truck came and threw the bundle of papers in front of a store. And his security jumped because they didn't know what this was. It was pre-dawn, around 4:30 in the morning. And when they saw just the newspapers, they relaxed. They looked down, got one of the papers. And the headline was, this was right after the election there in South Africa, '94. Says, he won an election. Now let's see if he can govern. And the security guy said, they're never satisfied, Madiba. He said, no, he's right. That we now have to prove we can govern. Part of the problem a lot of us had with President Obama is Obama's governing could not match a lot of our dreams. Half the stuff Obama didn't tell us he was going to do anyway. But a lot of us just imposed that he was just going to do whatever. I mean, when I landed in Johannesburg for the election, they was in the paper, a sister had gone out to the white folks' house and told them, I'll take this one. The guy said, what you mean? He said, I'll take this one. I like this house with the pool. She said, we won the election. I'm taking my house. A lot of us have unrealistic expectations. Governing is hard, which is why we've got to put people in that will do the hard work. And it is for that reason, before we start the next session, I wanted us to hear from one who has mastered movement and governing. He's a product of the movement. When I was a kid, Reverend Jackson, who's here today, sent us, when I was youth director of New York Operation Breadbasket, he sent us to Newark, New Jersey. they were campaigning for a black man to become mayor. They called it New Ark then. Somebody say New Ark, you know they old. They sent us to an address. We went there. It was called the Spirit House. Now y'all know I grew up in a Pentecostal church. They called it Holy Roller then, but we're Pentecostal. And I knocked on the door. I brought my youth division out there to see a Mr. Imamu Baraka. And I knocked on the door, and a brother opened the door. He had on a dashiki, a big wooden medallion, big fro, and he hit his chest, a Baragani. I looked at him, I didn't know what that meant. And he looked at me again, a Baragani. I'm standing about 20 kids. I didn't know what to say. He went the third time, a Baragani. I said, well, hallelujah, is a Mr. Baraka. I said, I'm looking for a Mr. Baraka. He said, who are you? I said, I'm Reverend Ras J from New York. He said, you're a preacher yet? So they let us in, and Mamu was waiting on us, and they would sit around having meetings and eat fruit and talk and read poetry and all. So when we went in the community campaigning for Ken Gibson, and I went back, and Reverend Jackson called and said, y'all went out to Newark? I said, yes, sir. He said, what do you think? I said, well, you know, it'd be kind of funny. They sit around eating watermelon, talking Swahili. But I guess it's all right, but they won. And they won against a gangster setup in Newark. But then they had to govern. And only Providence would have it that 30 years later, the son of the moving spirit of that election, the moving spirit of national black political, he's the one who convened the Gary Convention. And out of that, Stokes and others that had run come. Dick Hatcher co-chaired it with him, who was the first black mayor, Gary. There is lineage in this that led all the way from winning Gary and Cleveland to winning the first major city in the Northeast, Newark, led by Imamu Baraka, whose son now is the mayor of Newark, New Jersey. But he's not just a young man living on the laurels of his father. He came up through the movement himself, was an educator, teacher, all the way to principal. As we had to deal with many of the cases of racial profiling in New Jersey, don't forget, the first laws around racial profiling in this country was in New Jersey because of the New Jersey Turnpike. This man was right there in the fight as we marched on the turnpikes, as we dealt with Philip Purnell and Teaneck, as we dealt with shootings right there in Newark. He was in the fight, he and Sister Soldier and others. So I know him from his father, but I also know him walking hand in hand with us in the movement. And as he ran for the council and ran again for the council and ran for mayor and became mayor, he has done the Mandela transition, because they thought that because he was so movement that he could not have the business community still invest in the local community. He has the balance of making sure that the economy in Newark does not change, but at the same time not be overtaken and gentrified by those that want to exploit our municipalities but don't want to invest and work with us. So I want him to address us, because the model of Newark was the model of the 70s under Imamu Baraka. The model for us to take around the country home is the model of Newark under Mayor Ras Baraka. I bring to you the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, Mayor Ras Baraka.
First, just give me an opportunity to say thank you to Reverend Al Sharpton for inviting me and always having me here. It is humbling that, you know, I'm on a panel in these events with such incredible people. But I just want to also say that, particularly in these times, how important Reverend Al Sharpton becomes to all of us in this country. Absolutely. And somebody asked me before, should I be defending Reverend Al Sharpton? I said, I don't need to defend him. He know how to defend himself. I'm just going to stand with him. And that's the important thing, right? He needs the folks to stand with him, particularly in this time period where we are in a retrograde period, meaning folks are trying to push us backwards and backwards and backwards and backwards. And we have to have a strategy and a plan. And I don't want to be long. I've heard as part of the last panel, and we are pretty rough on President Obama. I know that. I hear everybody saying the things, the people getting up and say things, but last night I thought about it a little bit, and I said, in 1863, abolitionists lined up in the nation's capital, and among them was Frederick Douglass, who wore memories of slavery on his back like a permanent overcoat, all waiting to hear then President Abraham Lincoln deliver the news of Emancipation Proclamation. They didn't wait there because they believed that Lincoln was a radical abolitionist. They stood there because they had been fighting and pushing for years against the formidable institution of slavery. And before that day, there was no words and no action from a government that allowed millions to be bought and sold and murdered under the cloak of freedom. Some thought he wouldn't sign it, but he did. Their work, their struggle was not in vain. And when you can imagine that also present that day were escaped slaves from Virginia, waiting to hear that chattel slavery was moving closer to its permanent end, you could see the real relevance of this act and how in this context it was even radical at that time. Those that crowded the streets that New Year's Day looked at this document as the bottom, not the top. They looked at it as the start, not the finish. The same way we have to look at the election of first black president 2 times in a row by a broad coalition of progressives. We have to look at that as the bottom, not the top. It's the start, not the finish, meaning he was the beginning, you have to be the end. Millions of Americans who suffered Jim Crow, who brutalized and churches bombed, whose families were terrorized by fear and held down by brute force, by lingering poverty and desperate inequality, rejoiced when Barack Obama was elected president. They were moving closer and closer to democracy. They were happy that folks who experienced Jim Crow and the first time in their life was able to see the first African-American president in the most powerful nation in the world. They were happy, and they deserved the right to be happy. People like the same people who stood in the Capitol when the Emancipation Proclamation was signed. They didn't think that was the most revolutionary act, but it was revolutionary to them. If you were a slave, Emancipation Proclamation was revolutionary to you. They didn't realize even then that some years later that the first black senator would be elected to Mississippi, taking the place of a man who was a segregationist and the president of the Confederacy because of Reconstruction amendments that they began to push and push and push, and it became more and more progressive as time went on. But once that period ended in 1877, we were met with some of the most vile and some of the most racist backlash this country has ever seen. The slave codes, the black codes, the lynching for hundreds and hundreds of years. Thousands of black men, women, and children were lynched, hanging from trees, poles, even elected officials during the time of the end of Reconstruction. The same thing happened when we went around the world and fought against fascism. We destroyed the Nazis and fascism across the world and came back to the United States hoping for freedom, that the freedom that we fought for in Europe would find its way to America, only to be met by more racism, more segregation, more hatred. Then after the revolutionary period in the 60s, there was serious pushback, and we witnessed the war on drugs. We witnessed the incarceration period, the military, the prison industrial complex grow and grow and grow. And every time there's a progressive period, there is a backlash right after the progressive period. So when we witnessed the election of President Obama, after that, we should have been prepared for the backlash that came right after Reconstruction, the backlash that came right after World War II, the backlash that came right after the civil rights movement. The backlash was Ronald Reagan, the backlash now is Donald Trump and racism as populism. The backlash when racism becomes populism. When they begin to refer to racism as populism, then you know we're in a terrible time. When it becomes okay, when they get on TV and make it okay for people to be hateful, people to be racist, for people to be abusive, people to hate people based on religion, right, then you know that we're in a very difficult period. That is the backlash that we are experiencing, and we should have been prepared for that, because history has proven that after every progressive period, there is a retrograde period that follows. The last thing I really want to touch on, because I know you're waiting for the panel, is elections have consequences. We have to know that we can't play with this thing. We can't have 10 things we disagree on 2, then we walk away from the table. We can't do that. Our issues, the problems are greater than our individual selfishness. We cannot walk away because we disagree on 1 and 5, but we cool with 2, 4, 6, 8, and 9. It makes no sense for us to do that. I think that we're so used to struggling to get the ball that when we finally get the ball, we don't have any plays to take the ball over to the touchdown. We cannot fight over those specific things. Our inability to turn mobilization into organization is why we are in this state that we are in now. We are so busy attacking one another. We are so busy fighting one another that our real enemies don't have to do much. They come after we've already killed each other, and they clean up the mess that we've laid behind. So busy tearing each other down and finding ways to destroy. We get up here and ridicule and criticize, find every little thing to say to be against or disprove of what somebody is doing or saying to push us forward. Not what we connect on, not what we can unite on, not what we can come together on, but what we can be against. And that's the problem. When people say that Obama was Bush, it's incorrect. It's incorrect. It's a bad analysis. It's a terrible way to organize people. You might not like everything he did, but he was not George Bush. It's incorrect. And to say that is misleading. That's why you can't organize people, because you're confused and you're confusing them. The important thing is that we have to get, yes, you didn't elect Malcolm X to be the president. You elect Barack Obama to be the president. You didn't elect a radical revolutionary to be the president. Che Guevara wasn't the president of the United States. You elected Barack Obama to be the president of the United States. Our problem is we don't know how to push people to what we believe in and support them at the same time. It's the same reason why when New York City got rid of David Dinkins, you were stuck with these fascists for years and years to come. You were stuck with Giuliani. You were stuck with these people, and you've been fighting to get out of hell ever since. Because you disagree with Dinkins, so what? You disagree with your own mama sometimes. You got to struggle with them, but you got to support them. You cannot throw the baby out with the bathwater. You cannot say, oh, Dinkins, we don't want him, and then you get Giuliani. Because your enemies want you to fight each other. They want you to destroy each other, because once you pull him down, then you get the real fascists show up. And then there's some people that are amongst us, I'm going to sit down, Rev, who say that we need to get beat up, because if we get beat up, it'll help us organize. That is BS. Look, I'm from Newark. If you get beat up bad enough, you won't get up. Sometimes if you get beat up too bad, you run away and you don't come back. The only way you come back is if you think you're going to get a victory. You might get a chance to win. Or you think, I could take this guy right here. Right? You get punched and you feel good about yourself. Right? You don't get jumped on and beat on. No, the only way you win is you organize people. You organize people. You inform them. You get them together. Right? And the next panel is about all of us being together. We can't, I know you got the vegetarian revolutionaries over here, and you got the people who are into like the education folks over here, the housing folks over here. I'm against prison people. I want the free the political prisoners group over here. You got all these groups all over the place, right? But nobody is going to get anything until we all come together. Until we all come together. It's okay, brother. You like vegetarianism, that's cool. We won't serve you no pork. It's all right. You want to fight for housing, that's cool too. But housing is also about the increase of the minimum wage. And the increase in the minimum wage, people got to fight for women to get equal pay at their jobs. And the people that are fighting for women to get equal pay at their jobs got to fight against racism and segregation in these communities. And those that are fighting against racism and segregation in the communities have to fight against poverty in America. And those that are fighting against poverty in America have to fight for a better school system for our children. And those that are fighting for a better school system for our children have to fight that all religions are represented everywhere we go, and not